Happy October, folks. Last time, I talked about that time Scooby-Doo made some cringy references to Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh!, which both aired alongside What's New Scooby-Doo in the Kids WB block on Saturday mornings. What's New began airing in 2002, but Yu-Gi-Oh! Premiered in September of 2001. It was actually supposed to premiere on September 15th, 2001, but something else got in the way. A bunch of shows premiered on Kids WB around that time, most of which did not have the impact that Yu-Gi-Oh! Did. I'd like to talk about all of them one day, and perhaps in the course of time I will, but I want to focus on one of those shows today. So I've spoken previously about how I have a complicated relationship with gender identity and, to a lesser extent, my racial identity. Because of this, I respect creators who create characters whose gender or race could easily be swapped out without changing something significant about the character. In my view, RL Stine is one of the best writers when it comes to creating these kinds of characters. Indeed, the race and gender of several of his characters have been swapped in some adaptations. As Halloween approaches, and a new Goosebumps thing is coming out this week, I want to focus on one of the adaptations that doesn't get the same level of love as Goosebumps or even The Haunting Hour. I'm speaking, of course, of the short-lived RL Stine's The Nightmare Room, airing between 2001 and 2002 on Kids WB. Not many people remember or talk about this show, but it is primarily remembered among the people who do remember it for two things. It featured a lot of well-known child actors from that period, some of whom would go on to greater levels of fame: Shia LaBeouf, the Sprouse twins, Brenda Song, and even Kaylee Cuoco. It also had several prominent adult guest stars, including horror legends Robert Englund and Angus Scrimm. It also claims to be narrated by R.L. Stine himself, but it was actually narrated by Uncle Phil. However, I remember it for something else. Most of you, I assume, have seen my most popular video to date that details the rather bizarre history of gender relationships in Scooby-Doo. In a particularly egregious case, in the 1973 new Scooby-Doo episode, The Weird Winds of Winona, Fred, Shaggy, and Scooby sleep outside in bad weather, rather than be allowed to be shown sleeping in the Mystery Machine with Daphne and Velma. So, gender segregation, or at least its depiction, was much more important than any kind of verisimilitude. So I remember The Nightmare Room as one of the few kids shows that actually did depict co-ed sleeping among teenagers as a completely normal thing. This isn't universally the case. The first episode, Don't Forget Me, which starred Amanda Bynes, featured Amanda Bynes' character's father telling her no boys after dark, specifically referring to her male friend who was visiting. However, the third episode of the show is very different. The Howler, probably the most famous episode of the show, due to a guest appearance by Freddy Krueger himself, Robert Englund, features a sleepover between three teen characters: a girl played by Cara Delizia of Disney's So Weird fame, a show we should definitely talk about in depth at some point, and two boys. The characters are depicted in adjacent sleeping bags. They're practically cuddling. A similar scene plays out in the two-parter Camp Nowhere, featuring Allison Mack and Boy Meets World's Danielle Fishel. A group of 4 high school seniors, 2 boys and 2 girls, have to spend the night together in an old abandoned camp. They share the floor in their sleeping bags, and 2 of them even cuddle. Even strangers share sleeping quarters in Fear Games, a particularly terrible episode, but memorable for featuring Tippi Hedren as herself. While they don't sleep together, a mixed-gender group of friends, 3 boys and 2 girls, feature prominently in the episodes School Spirit and Full Moon Halloween, and it's the same group of characters in both episodes. I think platonic mixed-gender friend groups who are close enough to be comfortable with each other and even affectionate with each other are important in children's media, both to foment more meaningful gender equality and for people who wouldn't fit in well with single-gender friend groups. But the show was noteworthy for creating moments of genuine horror, at least for kiddie horror. For example, I remember the Drake Bell episode to be quite suspenseful. Kiddie horror is a unique genre that sort of reached its peak in the 1990s and hasn't found much of a modern audience. But for 90s kids, the genre helped to shape our view of the world, especially around Halloween. That's all for now, folks. Bye-bye.